talking to the customers. Iterate to excel, act with ownership, build psychological safety. And last principle we actually have in our company is begin with yourself. I founded Kartenmacherei. We're now roughly 100 million, slightly above 100 million euros in revenue. So I'm giving you through the ride of my 15 years of founder and investor and now CEO, ideas on the principles that make us build better companies, but also better products. Nice, quite light here. Hello, everyone. So I have the pleasure of finishing it almost up. When Thomas and I met, I think 3 weeks ago, maybe 4 weeks ago, and then 2 weeks later, he wrote me a message, "Hey, Christoph, don't you want to come and hold a speech?" I'm like, "Nah, I don't want to do that." So, and then he's like, because I'm not a product manager, that's how I see myself. Well, I saw myself. Thomas corrected me, let's say it that way. So we then run through what should I talk about, because there's quite a lot of things, but I'm not a specialist, right? I'm more the generalist. I have obviously built and seen companies building products for the last 15 years. I'm old, or I'm getting old. Then we somehow ended up with the topic principles. And then he's like, "Yeah, just talk about that and go into the deep dive." So I'm trying to do that today, giving you through the ride of my 15 years of founder and investor and now CEO role, and giving you some ideas on what I think the principles are that make us build better companies, but also better products, let's say it that way. So it works. That's cool. I think that's the fourth presentation that was done with Gamma app, which is quite cool, I have to say that. That's the only thing that I will say about AI today. So I think you heard enough about AI. As Sebastian already said, I founded Kartenmacherei, which we're selling old-style cards, printed cards, from wedding invitations to birth announcements. And we started in 2010. We built I would call it distant market leader. So we're 2 to 3 times as big as the next one. Why is that important? I'll talk about that later. We're a European market leader, right? And then I will talk about that later as well. In 2020, I founded Better Ventures, which is an impact angel club. So we're now more than 100 angels. I personally invested in more than 40 startups, including, maybe you've heard of Everdrop, located here in Munich, or Greenlight, Autark. It's everything around climate, plastic, mental health. So all these things where I think are necessary to invest in. And then somehow it came, so I dropped out of Kartenmacherei at some point after 10 years, and now I'm back since 2 years. And since that's part of the story, I don't want to spoil it too much. We're now roughly 100 million, slightly above 100 million euros in revenue. We have roughly 500 employees. That sounds big. Obviously, we have production and service. That's almost 2/3 of the company. So product people and tech, we're roughly, I think, 50. Just that you know what the scale of product teams is. Okay, so principles. Starting in 2010, the key principle back then that has been there, I think, all the time around, and it's kind of like a basic principle, but funnily, I recognize we haven't talked about it that much today, because I think, and that's what I learned from Thomas, when we got coaching from him, I think 6 years ago, 7 years ago, something like that, delighting our customers starts with talking to the customers, right? When we started in 2010, we were the first customers ourselves. So my wife came into the room and said, "Hey, I had this birth announcement. I looked online and it sucks. We can do that better." So I said, "Cool, let's do that." Right? And that 2-3 years later, we had Kartenmacherei live. And we were really differentiating. And back then, I think no one talked about 10x or anything. But we had at least 2 to 3x experience to everyone else in the market. How did we do that? Well, we were the customers. We listened to the customers. I mean, deeply listening to the customers. And we had 2 things. We had a much better quality. And it comes not only down to quality in terms of printing, but also the design, everything together with the customer service, right? And we had a high convenience. So I always like these 2x2 matrices. If you have on both axes, that's how you get to the 10x, right? So you got to have not only the convenience is a pain thing mostly, but also the gain thing, right? After 2 years, I think I stopped working in my own company as a customer service agent. So the first 2 years, I did really customer service on a day-to-day basis. So I didn't do any interviews like Thomas coached us. I did just customer service calls. But when you listen to your customer, right, that's how you learn so much about them. In 2013, I think I first time encountered the empathy map, pains, gains, jobs to be done. I don't know if it existed back then already. I thought like, wow, that's cool. Now I can finally give it a name what I have in my head, right? So I really had a complete idea of our target groups in their events, what they were looking for, but more on an emotional level. I think that's super important, right? And when it comes to convenience, the key thing for us was, so a small anecdote. When we started, I had one developer for me working, well, two, one agency and one developer. And the developer was a cousin of mine. And I said, like, I want these 100 features for our configurator because I felt like, I was a former consultant. I had PowerPoint, that was my #1 software. They had all these features that I could, like, it's also kind of like a configurator if you want. So I wanted to have these features. And he said, okay, cool. How much money do you have? And I'm like, 20K? And he's like, yeah, you get 20 features. Oh, shit, that sucks. The funny thing is he, at the same time, handed me the book, Don't Make Me Think. I never read the book, to be fair, right? But the title was actually it. So I had so much time to spend then on figuring out which of these 20 features I really had, which of these 100 features I really want to build. And that, in the end, played out to be really good because what especially female customers, and from my experience, but especially when you have kids, like small kids, you don't have much time. So ease of use, right? Everyone who has kids can relate to that. You don't have time anymore. Life is changing. So ease of use is really a critical criterion, right? And the more buttons in a configurator, the more questions you ask. So don't make the customer think. That's my #1 principle, still 15 years later. And then the last one, look for no instead of trying to be right. That's a rather recent one that I added here. Why is it important? I think sometimes when we do product management and we talk to customers, and I'm really convinced, I can be really convinced, then I'm trying to convince everyone, and I'm not listening deep enough. So I'm not seeing that there's actually someone saying no. So it's rather like, take it as a, think about it, but I think it's a good thing to do custom interviews, but look for the no's instead of the yeses. Doesn't mean you should be less convicted, right? So as a summary for that period, I'd say you can talk, but better listen to the customers. I think that's the one thing. And not understand, but feel them. It's the pains and gains and what they feel. If you can sell feelings, that's the magic, right? Especially in consumer products. But I think also, now the clicker. Oh. Next. Thomas told me to say next. Yeah. So the one question you might think about is like, how would the product make you feel? How does the product make the customer feel? That's one question that I would, think about. Next. Okay. Phase 2 was, and they obviously were slightly overlapping, but for the sake of the presentation, I tried to simplify it, was iterate to excel. We heard that a lot from Radhika this morning. I totally loved it. I felt like, okay, now I can take out that chapter. I still keep it and try to add my personal note. In 2013, roughly, for one of our categories, wedding invitations, which seemed to be somehow different in the customer expectations, we hit a plateau. So our main channel, marketing channel, was Google, and we were kind of like on a position 3 to 4 instead of on the other categories. We were already on, let's say, 1 to 2. And whoever knows something about Google, with an exponential curve, that means quite a lot of traffic that you're missing. So we looked into that, and I said, guys, we can't stay there. We need to do something. We somehow don't understand the customer in the right way. So we went back to the customers and asked, okay, what did you buy from us? Okay, that's wrong. What did you not buy? Or where did you buy instead of buying from us, right? So like we asked customers who came for our wedding thank you cards, but didn't buy the wedding invitations, which is obviously earlier, right? So, and they showed us all their portfolio. So we talked about to 120 customers on the phone. They showed us, they sent us their products, pictures of their products, like everything, and you could see it. Did we exactly build the same product? Obviously not. But we understood, again, what they wanted to have, like what they were missing. And the one thing that we didn't understand to that point is that for wedding invitations, the uniqueness of the finished product is like the expectation on that is dramatically higher than on a birth announcement or like a Christmas card, right? So we had to add ribbons and die cuts and some special stuff. They did do things on their own, and they went to a designer and a local printing facility instead of using us. So we did that. We introduced new formats. So we talked a bit about physical product management today as well. And this is one part. But for us, it was always a combination, right? You had the configurator and you had the physical product. So when we did that, to me, it's product first and then marketing. And it was like that. So first, the conversion rate increased. So we introduced these new formats, I think over the course of 2 to 3 months. 3 new formats, 40% conversion increase. I could see that directly in the acquisition channel, right? Google only desktop conversion rate on the top keywords, 40% up. What did we do? Well, we grew by 40%. No, we grew by 140% year over year because we spent more on marketing. That's why marketing to me is second, right? So you increase conversion rate, ROAS goes down or up in this case, right? And you can spend more. You can spend a lot more, and then you have the multiplication effect out of it. Pretty cool, I think. So what can you take out of that? I think Radhika said it also already almost perfectly. You got to have a clear focus, a clear goal, right? That's what I wrote here. Keep focus, aim high. So what's the goal? What's the key metric? For us, it was conversion rate. But you got to be sure which team, what your company is kind of like focusing on. You can't have tens of focuses, right? It doesn't work like that. I always, as a former consultant, love driver trees. So you trickle down like a whole KPI tree, and then you can say, that's the one. That we're going, and then like all the influencing parts. I think one note to being a product manager, as a product manager, you have to manage a lot of complexity, and you have to be a great communicator. You can't do that without visualizing or explaining things. Like the whole thing, like one part of being a great product manager, if you ask me, is simplifying. And we talked about that earlier. So simplification with a driver tree, simplification with clear focus and saying no to other things, super important, right? I skipped the A/B testing dilemma. I think we talked about that, right? There's a bit of a, I think the stretch for product management, for really great product managers, is you got to build the vision, and then you got to start small. And then there's people who stay doing things, small things that don't matter. And there are people who like build big things without iterating. Both, I can guarantee you, everything from I've seen, roughly 50 companies now, you're going to be failing with a much higher likelihood, let's say it that way. Right? And that's also what we see in startups a lot, is this premature scaling. So you build something, then a VC jumps in, you get some money, you got to grow, but you're actually not, your flywheel is not yet there. So you put marketing in first and not product first. And then at some point of time, growth is stalling. And what's happening then? Well, you don't get any money anymore. I've seen that now a couple of times over the last years. No money. So what are you going to do then? Well, then you have to restructure this, and then Ollie is coming maybe and helping you to rebuild the product so that it actually works. Well, that sucks, guys. I wouldn't do it. So I'd rather take a bit more time. Doesn't mean you can't use no-code tools. That's always a good approach at the beginning. Oh, yeah. So to summarize, I'd say ambitious focus, meaning goal, clearly focus on the target group, right? Very often I see product managers, you do the talks, you talk to the customers, but to the wrong ones, okay? And then this rule comes, I talk to 7 customers, that's enough. I'm like, okay, let's show me who you talk to, right? Okay, if you want to optimize wedding invitation, then don't talk to elderly people who already got married like 20 years ago. That doesn't really make sense, right? Might sound simple, and honestly, I've seen that so often. These simple things make a big, big difference, right? And if you do that with an iteration in the second step, like big goal, iterate small, you got to have exponential impact. Another beautiful questions. I think that stretching your own. I've seen many product managers that didn't stretch themselves enough, right? So how do you know if you're ambitious enough? That's like, I wake up in the morning and I'm like, what can I get out of that a bit more, right? So that's a question to think about maybe. I have to speed up, I think. The next phase was act with ownership. We heard a bit about empowered teams. Again, in 2015, we were financially successful. We were a market leader in cards in Germany, Austria, Switzerland. And we did an employee NPS, Net Promoter Score, and that was shitty. So we were financially successful, and the team was the opposite of being happy. I wouldn't say happy is the metric I would look at today. We still do employee net promoter score, but they wouldn't recommend us to the degree that I actually expected. So our customer NPS was 80 something, and employee was -20 or something like. So that's not that good, let's say. So my brother and I, who joined me a year later, we actually made a deep dive, right, into that whole topic of how to run an organization that employees can actually be motivated. That was at the time when Spotify came up with these cross-functional squads and so on, right? We talked to Stylab back then, we talked to Spotify, to Trivago, and like all these companies. We built back then, they wouldn't be called Empower Teams. I think today they're called Empower Teams, with slight differences maybe. We looked into Daniel Pink and everything about purpose, autonomy, and mastery. But I think the key thing that we implemented was autonomy. And the other thing that we implemented, we wouldn't have to take all the decisions any longer. So the idea was to, by giving the decision into the different teams, empowered teams, I wasn't the bottleneck anymore. Because at some time, we were 80 employees in something like 2016. I felt like I had to take every decision. We were working in silos, right? Then we turned it around. So we work in cross-functional teams. You have to think about a cross-functional team for us was back then a bit like what Christian said, is we had one team for wedding, one team for moms, and one team for birthday and other events, let's say, right? And there was almost everything in. We kind of like stretched it a bit too far, let's say. It was more than just a tech product team. So we learned on the way, obviously. But the biggest thing we learned is, in the moment we put these teams together, there was no one leading them in the way, right? So we were experimenting, and we thought like, hey, they naturally lead themselves. I was a bit, let's say, stupid in retrospect, let's say it that way. But anyways, what I want to say is, autonomy needs ownership. Just keep that in mind. Like, if you empower a team, you need to have people who take the ownership. Ralph said it's accountability. I'd say it's ownership. Anyways, back then I called it, I need entrepreneurs, like tiny entrepreneurs in residence, whatever. At some point in time, today they're called product owners, not any longer, product managers. We call them business owners because not only for product, but also for portfolio or marketing and so on. And the decisive part for us was to figure out that the mindset is actually more important for these roles, because they're more generalist roles, than the functional experience, or at least as important. And before, we were all looking into functional, and we were talking like, we were doing a culture fit, like, hey, do you want to work with that person? Yeah, okay, cool, let's hire them. They did a good case. But the mindset, so we added the predictive index as test in every recruiting. We're, by the way, still doing that also at Better Ventures, at the Angel Club. Every founding team that we're interested in has to do a predictive index. And they love it, because they learn something about themselves. They get a little tiny coaching from us. But the mindset looking into that really helped us identify the right people, right? Yeah. Next. So, in a nutshell, if you ask me, let's say, we have a history, especially in Germany, of having a lot of product managers who, if you ask me, are not product managers that I would hire. And that might be a bit controversial in this round. But I think if you want to do product management and you don't have a mindset of driving, being decisive, taking risk tolerance, especially when you are customer-facing product management, and you need to be convincing, like there's a lot of more things you have to have, I would honestly think about it, because it would imply that you need to change yourself, which is possible. I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it is quite a thing, let's say. I can tell you a journey about that one. Another time, next, please. Yeah, so some of you might have that feeling, hey, I'm dancing around all these A/B tests. How can I take more ownership? Meaning, how can I say no? Because ownership doesn't mean, like, I own this thing, I'm like so strong. It means actually saying no and putting a clear focus and saying no to your boss, your stakeholders, because you always have, as a product manager, too much to do. There's never going to be a moment where you think, oh, I'm done. Does any one of you ever, it's not going to happen, right? So how do you learn to say no? Well, let's talk about that in a couple of minutes. Okay, back to the history, back to the story. In 2020, 10 years later, I thought, okay, so we got this, we have financial success, we have the team more motivated, right? And I was kind of bored doing 10 years of cards. I might have a bit of ADHD, I don't know. But anyways, I felt like I want to do something else, right? So I left directly after COVID. Don't question that. The decision was taken earlier, but we kind of like accelerated a bit. Then with my two co-founders, I started Better Ventures, invested in the impact founders, learned a lot, learned really a lot. And then we sold part of the company. And then, I don't know, I think 2 weeks, the money on the bank account, I thought, I stopped working at Better Ventures. And the next half year, I was just completely burned out. I mean, literally completely burned out. And it's imagine that. You get all the money on the bank account you always wanted. There's nothing you actually want to achieve beyond that. It's you don't have to work anymore. And you're burned out. I felt wow, that doesn't make sense, right? So, well, I started coaching back then, coincidentally. And then I restructured my body because I was kind of overweight. And my family life, because as a founder, sometimes it happens, might be also true for product managers, that the family is the last thing you kind of have time for, or yourself. I mean, it's yourself down there somewhere, then family, and then usually is all the things that you have in mind, which sucks to some degree. Yeah, that took me 2 years, roughly. I was almost a longevity expert, and then at Celebrate. So Celebrate is a event-driven business, right? 2/3 of our revenue are from weddings, birthdays, confirmation, baptism. So COVID was a real pleasure for us, you can imagine, right? Exactly the opposite. So it took 3 days to go from plus 30% growth to minus 52. 3 days. I was sitting on the beach, vacations, was Easter holiday, and I thought my company was gone, right? So once COVID was over, I felt cool, we got it. If we got through that, nothing can actually hurt us as much as that, right? So we did it. Okay, the whole team thought that. Well, what came after COVID? What are we in currently? Ukraine and so on, right? A bit of a spoiler. Can you, next please? Yeah, we lost track. And I somehow felt someday I have to restructure my own company, right? After I left, I was joking about it. As a former consultant, I did some restructuring projects, so I kind of knew what to do. It's nothing you look out for, right? Nothing you wait for. Anyways, we lost track. So the team, and I don't blame the team for that, right? But it's just the situation was we stopped building the future in cars. We were a distant market leader. We were a bit, let's say, how do you say that? We felt good, let's say it that way. COVID was over. We were all totally stressed in COVID. So we took the time to, invest into more people and all that stuff. But we didn't really build big improvements. That's one thing. So we knew cars, hey, okay, maybe it's not a future market. So maybe we can grow internationally a bit, but we also need to diversify into other product categories. So the team started to do photo books. Well, yeah, photo books. Okay, they try to build photo books, they try to build the vision. Okay, we're gonna be photo books, huge. We're gonna kick some silver butts, That didn't really happen because they didn't iterate, not at all. They didn't even talk to customers in a way. Thomas and I talked to customers in 2018, 19, also for photo book. Yeah, but that's how you fail with a product, let's say, or at least don't get to anything close to a market leading position, right? And at the same time, we have heard that story from all tech legacy, yeah. So they dare to do the big decisions, right? They wouldn't get rid of the legacy. We started with Magento. We still have some part of Magento. I know that feels hard to say that. 15-year-old Magento, you don't want to, let's not talk about the version. It really sucks, but we're just getting rid of it. Yeah, so you know what happens if you have this old legacy, you build more complexity into a product that doesn't really add value. Well, funnily, developer velocity goes down to almost not existing anymore, right? And that is next. So the question is, what went wrong? It was a really striving company, right? Next. Oh, don't click. Yeah. So obviously, as I said, the answer seemed obvious. We had Ukraine, we had recession, and I don't know if you know that, there were some articles around that, but we have 20% less weddings or marriages, and we have 20% less birth, children coming to the world in Europe. That sucks. Really, that's the future of us, for many business models. We feel it earlier, let's say it that way. Sucks even more. So I could say, hey, okay, that's all recession. Let's do restructuring. That's it, right? Okay, and maybe add some individual mistakes. taking wrong or let's say no decisions. Obviously, I could see that in the company as well. Like, why didn't you, get rid of the legacy? Like, I mean, I could blame them all, and partly I probably also did that, right? And I think if I would summarize it on a hat base, let's say, they just ignored what made us successful. So everything I talked about earlier, the 3 principles, they completely ignored those. They stopped talking to the customers. They built the vision instead of iterating. And they let short improvements win over long-term improvements. So I kind of didn't take ownership, right? I didn't act with ownership, if you want. So now the next question would be, okay, why didn't I intervene? Why didn't the team intervene? Why didn't they do anything, right? I mean, if it's so obvious. Well, it was kind of hard to phrase that in one sentence. And, I don't want to exaggerate it, but I'd say the hard truth is that our culture didn't work. So we invested a lot into the culture, and then it didn't work. Because we maybe invested too much in like organizational stuff, instead of real culture, instead of psychological safety. So I came back then because I felt I have to rescue this company. It's my heritage, right? It's not about the money. I was sitting down with my wife. Honestly, I don't want the money anymore. I just want life. But I can't do that. This is an amazing team, right? This is an amazing team. We have this heritage. I built this for 10 years with blood and sweat. Like, I can't do that, right? So I said, like, I will try it. Okay, cool. I tried. So I went back 2 years ago, and it was 2 years. It's still 2 years of quite a bit of work. But work, not only like the work in the head, but like a lot of work, and I talk about it now. So after talking or listening better to like first the leaders, but then also I went into all the offices. We have a couple of them. Remote first company with 3 offices and 2 production facilities, or it's even 4 offices. So I went to all the offices. We had town hall meetings. I listened to them, and funnily, they saw it. Not everyone saw the whole picture. Well, but think about it. Like, you're in companies. How often do you see that the company is running in the wrong direction? We talked about over-communication. Not every company is like that. But you got that feeling, right? There's this gossiping, this rumor going on. You feel like, if they don't talk about the numbers, maybe they're shitty. Yeah, that might be true. So when I talked to them and I summarized everything, it wasn't me only, right? I had all the big projects. I had all the roadmap was there. I was just normally a strategy consultant takes a couple of weeks, months to come up with a strategy, right? That's how we did it in the past. It took me, like, I wrote it, a triangle, like, this is what we got to do. It's mostly, I would phrase it, back to the roots. What I said earlier, right? But I added something, and that is, and now it gets a bit wishy-washy maybe for you guys, right? I don't know, let's see. I'm waiting for the juries out. But that's the interesting part if you ask me. Like, what I learned over the last years is, well, I reinforced the principles, surprise, surprise. But I also went into how do you actually build psychological safety, right? And that's quite interesting. You probably all, I mean, who has read the book from Patrick Lencioni about vulnerability and 5 dysfunctions of a team? Never heard? If not, I would read it. It's super simple. It's a beautiful, easy-to-read book, and it summarizes quite nicely how you build trust and psychological safety. There's much more to it, right? There's many more concepts, and I wrote down something. If you want, I can give you many references to read into that topic. But it starts usually with vulnerability. And that's nothing that us head persons, many product managers, many product leaders, we're not that emotional because we have to fix these things. We have to look into all this data, right? And I gotta solve that. I have this driver tree. I didn't really know what my emotions were, and like talking about that felt kind of strange. So Brené Brown defines vulnerability, and it's kind of like being courageous. It's like you talk about the stuff that you're actually scared to talk about. Does that make sense? Well, it's kind of scientifically proven that that actually helps to build trust, which is the foundation of building a high-performing team. Psychological safety is different levels of trust, right? So the next thing that you can do is being in wonder. We talked about listening. It's not about listening to, okay, I got to get confirmation for what you think is right. It's actually about listening, right? It's what we do in product interviews. If you do it the right way, you can also do that with your team. And then it's about empathy. Sometimes it's not saying anything, not asking questions, just being there. Just being there without any judgment, right? I skipped the impartiality, that's too hard to explain. If anyone wants to know, come to me. But anyways, we phrase it like that in the principle, which sounds really wishy-washy if you don't know what I mean by that, but it's embrace meaningful connection. Right? It's not meeting and drinking a beer, it's actually being there and talking to each other, listening to each other, and really being present. And the main reason behind it is to increase psychological safety. It's within the team, but it's also across the team, because as a product manager, you have one team, right? Which, by the way, is not really reporting to you. That makes it even more difficult. But you have also other, like we talked about, like all these stakeholders that Thomas talked about, right? Hey, how do you talk to them if you don't have trust? It doesn't work. How do you say no if you don't have trust? That's what I think Jens talked about. It's like saying no is kind of like impossible. The thing is, for saying no, you got to trust that person that he's not going to fire you, right? So that's trust, that you're allowed to say something. So again, so now when is the story over? I'm getting there. How did we end up here? Like, why? Like, go back. We had agile coaches. They're meant to build psychological safety. Like, we had this organization. We read all these books about motivation. Like, how did we end up there? Well, I have an hypothesis, and this is, I had to start with myself. So as a founder, as a bootstrapper, as a single solo founder, makes it really strange. Don't do that. Always build with a team. I just rephrased what one of my coaches once said into my face in front of, I think, 20 people. And he said, like, Christoph, you put your trauma into your company. And that sounds really awkward, and it didn't really feel good, let's say it that way. But I mean, to say it that way, in the words of my coaches, I'm referring to them, it's the self-reliance that many of us have as product managers, as founders, as product leaders, right? So you got to be self-reliant, meaning you got to get this shit done. No one else is going to do it, right? We know that. We have to do that, right? We stand up in the morning, oh, there's some more stuff to do. Okay, let's do it. But the thing is, the question is, what's driving that? And I thought it's like, it has to be like that. And the feeling that comes along with it is like you feel alone, right? You feel never enough. It could always be more. Like the to-do list is like huge. The roadmap is always there, like all these stakeholders. And that's the thing. Like, how do you feel enough? Again, I said it's wishy-washy. I don't think, but it feels like that. It felt for me at the beginning. I thought, like, what the heck are they talking about, right? But it's about feelings. It's about what we try to get from the customers. It's about finding that in ourselves, right? And then also with the team. That's what I should do. So I went into coaching at the same time. I also did coaching beforehand. But finally, I had my case to practice besides the family. Poor family had to deal with it 2 years, my son and my daughter. But then I went into the company and actually tried to practice it there. Not practice, but actually to apply it, right? So, so the last principle we actually have in our company is begin with yourself. And it's not meant to be a pressure on you, like, you gotta do that, right? You gotta work on yourself. No, it's actually understanding that you're a human being, that it's totally fine if you have a fear of being ashamed, that it's totally fine that you feel alone, and that it's okay. But once you speak it out, so I just did that, like, we had this big team event, and I did that in front of 20 people. I said, I'm fucking feeling alone. As a CEO, you sometimes very often feel alone, right? And that's okay. So what do you get? What do you think what you get when you talk about that? Not that one, right? They're gonna give you hugs and they're gonna be with you. And that's what we human beings sometimes need, right? That's connection. So it's really, for driving decisions, I think you need to understand your feelings. I always said, and that was before my coaching, said like, hey, how do you take decisions? I'm like, well, I put all that data into me from a consultant, and then my gut decides, okay? I never thought about that the gut actually has some own meaning and not just, puts it all together. But that's the thing, you have your heart and your gut. And I can only advise everyone, that's an advice, find someone you can talk to and that listens to you. That was a game changer for me. Am I good in time? Kind of, right? I'm dancing through the last slides, let's see. So another thought about that is, and that's the beauty of it, once you go there, you think, oh, now that hurts. And it hurts at the beginning, yeah, absolutely. But you also see how these beliefs that you have, this negative self-talk, every one of us had that, huge concepts around that, is limiting us. So how can we get rid of it? Huh? No, you can't. But you can see it and you can kind of welcome it. That's the thing. You can see that you're a human being that's trying to make it better, that's trying to that just wants to be seen, right? Everyone else just wants to be seen, and that's totally okay. That's not Schopenhauer. That's not, I'm an egoistic person. That's just human. When you grow up, when you come to this world as a baby, you want to be seen, right? That's how you understand you're being loved. And this is true not only for you, but for everyone in your damn teams. And that's important to understand. Yeah. So that's next. The story of myself and the company, if you want, and of the 5 principles. Can you click at one time? Okay, thanks, cool. So here are the 5 principles. It's important to understand, I would phrase it like that. So like you have values, we had values for lots of years, and I felt like, okay, they're there, but they're never used. Who agrees that you have values in your company and they're like something on the wall, but that you don't use them? Anyone? Or you all live by your values every day? Cool. Then you can help me. That's good. Honestly, so if you ask me, these principles are really made to take the decision. While I was preparing this talk over the last couple of nights, I talked to my wife, like, fuck this. Honestly, all the bad decisions I took over the last 5 years, I didn't act on the principles. If I would have taken the principles in the moment I would have taken the decision, I would have taken a different decision or just said no. So the good thing about that one, we'd like to simplify life. This is the simplification. You have the principle, look at the big decisions. Oh, cool. Did I talk to the customer? No. Would the customer say, I love it? No. Okay, then skip it. Easy, huh? So it takes the decision, it makes life easier. And it helps you with emotional struggles. That's the thing, right? There's a lot of emotional struggles that we have, right? We want to be right. We don't want to feel shame. We feel shame all the time, by the way. We have a huge fear of failing, right? That's why we're not going that big risk that we could. Or we don't communicate it because we could be, maybe we're fired, right? I think a lot of people had fear that I would fire them without me doing anything. I'm powerful. When I came back, one person talked to me and was like, okay, how do we deal with that? Last time didn't really work out. And she's like, but that's you. And I'm like, what are you doing? It's just powerful. Okay. What do you mean? It's like, well, you could fire me every day. Yeah, that's not going to change. So that's true. But there's 2 ways. Like I can look at it, what can I do? You know, I have a specific way of, you feel that already, quite dominant person, right? And I can deal with that. I can ask questions instead of giving answers, for example, right? So these principles will help you, especially the last one, and then from the last one to the second one. And then the other 3, if you ask me, will play out much easier. Not easy, just easier, let's say, almost automatically. So yeah, ask yourself the question, what are you struggling with of these emotions or these principles if you think they're right? And think about it and work on it, right? We talked about this. Next, please. Thank you. Yeah, that's the picture for the kids. If you ask me, PM, not only the founders, but PM, product leads, CPOs, and we talked about it the whole day now, I feel like, is one of the toughest jobs, right, that you can have. Because you have all these stakeholders. You got to manage it from the details to the vision, right? You break down the vision into the details. Is it big enough? No, did I miss something? Is the hypothesis right? Am I focusing on the right target group? What's marketing saying? Like all these things. There's so many trade-offs. Like you have this, these dimensions where you need a huge spectrum of what you can do, right? And you need to be a great communicator, right? Over-communicate. You need to be convincing because you got to convince your team, but also the stakeholders that you're running in the right direction. That's, honestly, I felt that was quite scary. I didn't even have a boss. Now I have investors. Okay, somewhat a boss, not really. I think there's a better way of doing it, right? And that's maybe the key message that I would like you to take away, is if you begin with yourself and find someone to listen, that listens to you, and you go from, instead of being self-reliant, being self-reflected and transform yourself, seeing what your fears and your feelings are, you go from artificial harmony to real connection in your team. And you go from exhaustion, which many, I guess, of you feel from time to time, into enjoyment. Because that's the positive thing, you're not only getting better results, as I wrote down below that, you actually get enjoyment. So to sum it up, yeah, get a like. Okay. One question, last question to you is like, how can you enjoy building products 10% more? Think about that. Like, what's the thing that you don't like about product management? What's the feeling? So that's the last comment that I have. It's not working. Okay. So it was like 3-4 weeks ago. And my wife said, I think, or my coach and my wife, I have lots of dialogues, let's say. So, and I think my coach said, like, what would happen if Celebrate wouldn't exist anymore, like bankrupt, whatever. You know, you have these thoughts in your mind and all these feelings. And I was like, oh, you don't even have money anymore. Like, just these existential threats. All right. I don't know, I have to think about it. Next day, I woke up 5 o'clock in the morning, went to the shower. My wife came slightly later. I was too noisy. And they're like, what's going on? Like, I got it. It's like, okay, what are you talking about? Like, okay, I told her the whole story. And I said, you know, if I would have nothing tomorrow or today, what would I do the next day? I would still build. And that's I think many of you have that. So the love for the product, right? I love building products. I genuinely love building products. And actually, many of you probably have the same. Like, you know, someone's called it puzzles, problems to solve. But this is like me sitting at a beach and building this castle and just seeing how you create something. Like, I'm a creator. We are creators. And that's the thing that I would like you to take away. Like, if you can enjoy being a creator, we can change the world. Thank you.
Christoph, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I couldn't imagine ending it on a better note. I have one thing I would like to say. I think in a high-pressure job such as product management, it's not always easy, as Christoph said, to talk about feelings. And I know that people don't want to talk about feelings. And I think you setting the example and like also saying like it was hard for you to begin with and to get there, and still is. Yeah, I could feel that. But even if it was hard, you're still sharing this with us, and I feel deeply grateful for that. And thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.